Hi, it's Jason Soloman and Scott O'Connell, and today we're going to discuss required minimum distributions. Since we're near the end of the year, we thought this would be an appropriate topic. If you haven't taken your required minimum distributions this year and you're at an age where you need to get it done right now. Today we're going to discuss what a required minimum distribution is, when you have to take them, how much you have to take, and how you can reduce them. Scott, tell us what a required minimum distribution is, please.
Yeah, required minimum distribution is the way for the government to get their tax dollars back on retirement accounts that you have not paid taxes into yet, such as 401ks, IRAs, SEP IRAs, other employer retirement plans. So when you put money into a 401k with a company or an IRA, you have not paid any taxes on those dollars. And so the government eventually wants to have those tax dollars back. And so the required minimum distributions, or the RMDs, are designed to start bleeding out, so to speak, these accounts. Now, when do you have to start taking them? Well, it depends on when you were born.
If you were born before July 1st, 1949, you're already taking your required minimum distributions. And if you haven't taken them and the government finds out, they're going to penalize you. If you were born July 1st, 1949 to 1950, you're also already taking your required minimum distributions. 1951 to 1959, you didn't have to take the RMD until you were 73 years old. And now if you were born after 1960, you won't have to take a required minimum distribution until age 75. These dates, the times that you have to take them, have changed. Since I've been doing this over 20 years, they always make changes, it seems like. And it's really fun for software, and it's really fun for having to brush up on the issues. But at this point in time, it seems like they're delaying the age that people have to take their required minimum distributions. It wouldn't surprise me if they go the other way, though. With the amount of debt this country has, it's a great way for the government to raise assets.
Yeah, and actually, to clarify a little bit, the first year of your RMD age, you have until April 1st of the following year after turning that age to take this distribution. It's sort of like a grace period for your first year in case you forget or didn't plan accordingly. But after that, you have until December 31st of each year to make the distribution amount. And again, remember, it's a minimum distribution, so you could always take more. And many of you may already be taking distributions from these accounts, so there's no need to necessarily calculate it, but you should be aware of what your RMD is each year. So for the first year, you could take it up to April 1st of the following year, but keep in mind, if you do that, you're going to have to actually have two distributions for that year. And then going forward, you have to take it by December 31st of that year in order to satisfy it. And if you don't, what is the penalty? Well, they've changed that over the years as well. It's still a pretty hefty penalty if you do not take your RMD for that year. It's a 25% penalty of the amount that you were supposed to take, right? So just be aware of that. And, if you decide to take it April 1st of the following year after your first year, just keep in mind you have to make two for that year. And depending on what your tax plan is and your tax strategy, that may not be the best case.
All right, great. So we know when we have to start taking our required minimum distributions. How do we know how much to take? Well, there's a uniform lifetime table that's going to tell you exactly how much you need to take for your required minimum distribution. We'll go through an example right now of somebody who is 76 years old this year, and on December 31st of the prior year, they had $100,000 in their IRA. We look at this uniform table, and the factor we'll use is 23.7. So you simply take $100,000, you divide it by the factor that aligns with your age, and your required minimum distribution in this example is $4,219.
As Jason was mentioning how you calculate it, there's a uniform lifetime table. But what if you have several accounts that require the minimum distribution? For instance, you may have one 401k account and 3 IRA accounts. Well, you have to calculate each account separately to come up with an RMD. Now, that doesn't mean you have to take the distribution from each account. So in this example, if you had 3 IRAs, you could calculate each IRA separately. And let's say the RMD for the total was $10,000. Well, you could take $10,000 out of one of the accounts. You can aggregate your distribution from one of the accounts. However, if you have a 401k and you have an IRA, those are separate types of accounts, and you have to take the distribution from each type of account separately. The calculation that you use, though, the value that you use for the calculation is based off of December 31st of the prior year. So it's important to get your year-end summary, your year-end values from these qualified accounts from December 31st of the prior year. And again, these are just the minimum. You can take more than that. You just can't take less without a penalty. And the income that comes from these distributions are taxed as ordinary income.
So there are ways you can reduce the amount that you have to take for your required minimum distribution, but a lot of those things have to happen prior to the time that your required minimum distributions hit. You could take withdrawals long before you reach the age of required minimum distribution. Once you hit 59 and a half in these qualified accounts, IRAs especially, you can take distributions at that point without a penalty. So if you begin that process at that age, there's pros and cons to doing that, but one of the pros is your required minimum distribution is going to be much less, most likely, than it otherwise would have been. Another way to reduce the amount of your required minimum distribution is to make a qualified charitable distribution.
Yeah, if you're charitably inclined, you can make a distribution from your IRA account and have that go directly to the charity, which will do two things. You'll satisfy your RMD requirement for that year without actually taking the distribution, and it won't show as income for you on your tax return. In other words, you'll give the money directly from your IRA to the charity, will not show up on your tax return, and it will satisfy the RMD. Now, another way to do it too, if you plan ahead enough, again, these are some plans that you may want to do prior to your RMD age, is start to convert your IRAs into Roth IRAs. So by doing that, you'll pay the tax on the IRA conversion on the year that you move it, but everything, once it's in the Roth IRA, is tax-free, including the growth and the distributions if they're qualified.
Yeah, and honestly, each one of these strategies we could probably spend another 25 minutes in separate videos on, but we're just giving you ideas today. So biggest priority is we're at the end of the year right now, and those of you that are at the required minimum distribution age, make sure you get those things done and make sure you get them done before the end of the year.